If I had to name one thing that should be brought up more in the various analytical content that exists for Persona 5 on the interwebs, it would be the sociocultural issues that are unique to the island nation of Japan. Or, the very place where the game was developed and chosen as its setting. Hey guys, I'm Lady, and I love doing analyses on the Persona games, so if that's your thing, you've come to the right place. But back to the topic of this video. Unlike most other fantasy-based anime, JRPGs, or basically any media that's coming out of Japan, or hell, even the previous Hashino-era Persona games that have a Japanese setting, Persona 5 in particular is a social commentary on the issues that affect modern Japanese society. And so, because of this, understanding authorial intent is basically a must when dissecting Persona 5's themes and characters, much more so than that of other media coming out of Japan. So that begs the question, how can we define authorial intent? This concept requires that we look at the author's intended interpretation as defined directly in the work itself. So, as annoying as the constantly repeated "shitty, rotten adults" line can get, it was Hashino and his team's intent to bring attention to this problem. I'll explain more about why a much starker social line, for lack of a better term, exists between children and adults in East Asian societies compared to those in the West a little later on in this video. But to wrap up authorial intent, the opposite, called reader response, is what makes up most of the Persona 5 video essays on YouTube from what I've seen. The majority of the biggest JRPG and anime YouTubers' analyses in general are obviously coming from a Western perspective. In other words, their approach relies a lot on reader response, which can essentially be defined as interpreting the work via the reader's perspective. Like from their personal life experiences and values, without the author's influence. There's nothing inherently wrong with these analyses. They make for perfectly enjoyable and convincing video essays the vast majority of the time. However, I'll be going over why foregoing authorial intent and proper context does such a huge disservice to Persona 5's themes, narrative, and character arcs. Establishing the proper East Asian context for a Western audience just means a lot to me because of my Japanese ancestry. In other words, I enjoy sharing my heritage with you guys, so I hope this series of videos will offer a new perspective, whether you love P5's story or not. So first off, let's take a look at some interviews with Director Hashino back from 2016 and 2017. It's here where he shares the inspiration for P5's setting and premise, which both distinctly feature societal issues prevalent within Japan. He told 4Gamer in the month before P5's initial release that the premise was originally going to be a globe-trotting adventure. A coming-of-age journey that spanned various parts of the world. But then the Tohoku earthquake hit Japan in 2011, resulting in Hashino's shift in approach and the setting of P5 being redirected back home. Hashino confirmed in various interviews that P5 is unabashedly Japanese and addressed recent political scandals in the country at the time. As we can see from the game, the narrative focuses on the injustices that outcasts face within Japanese society. Does it have flawless execution? Of course not. However, that doesn't discount just how much of a greater understanding can be achieved in regards to P5's narrative via learning about actual Japanese culture. By viewing it from the audience's perspective that it was specifically developed for. Establishing the proper context adds so much to the nuance and complexity surrounding this kind of narrative, whether it be the xenophobia on 5's, the exploitation that Yusuke and his peers put up with, Joker's conviction on false charges, and so on down the line of P5's main cast. Things like the Koseki system, Mukoyoshi, and Shinro Shiro are just a few of the aspects that make up normal life in Japanese society. But to anyone else who isn't familiar with the culture, these words probably just sounded like I just pulled out some random letters from my alphabet soup. As for the palace rulers, all of them are based on some kind of societal injustice as well, whether the average Japanese citizen has experienced it firsthand or through the lens of the nightly news. Stories about abusive teachers like Kamoshida and Marurame, and corrupt companies called buraku kigyo, like Okumura Foods, were especially relevant at the time of P5's release. Once I finish doing videos dissecting all of the Phantom Thieves connections to Japanese cultural issues, I'll try to do the same with some big roundup video for the palace rulers. So with all of this context in mind, Hashino's surprise at how well received P5 was in the West suddenly makes a ton more sense, right? He knew it was a highly anticipated game, but couldn't be sure how the political commentary would be viewed by a global audience. Sure, there will always be some degree of understanding and relatability across all cultures, but it can't be overstated how different Japanese cultural values are from those in the wider Western world. Which brings us to the next part. Remember how I said earlier on in this video that there's a cultural explanation for the rotten adults line we hear all the time? Well, that reason is rooted in the philosophy of Confucianism, which has strongly influenced all the countries in Eastern Asia. So before I dive into Confucianism and its vast influence, let's define culture so we're on the same exact page. The term culture is now commonly defined as the set of values and beliefs people have about 1. How the world, which includes both nature and society, works, and 2. The norms and behavior that result from this set of values. In this sense, culture affects every single facet of any given society, ranging from its economy to its government institutions, to its education system, its social hierarchy, the concept of self, and everything in between. In addition to this, we must understand that Japan's, and wider Asia's, collectivist culture is very different from the more individualistic societies of the West. Collectivist values place emphasis on group cohesion over the self, while individualistic values favor the freedom of the individual over the collective. So why does this matter? Well, any deviance from the majority or the natural societal order is met with heightened stigma in collectivist Japan compared to the USA, for example. In other words, if you don't fit in with the norm, you're basically screwed. Now, let's touch on the Confucianist value of filial piety. Filial piety entails a strong loyalty and deference to one's parents, to one's ancestors, and by extension, to one's country and its leaders. The idea stems from the fact that parents give life to children and support them throughout their developing years, so the children are thusly indebted to their parents and must respect them all their lives. The tenet of filial piety extends to all elders, such as teachers, superiors in one's profession, anyone who's older in age, like think of the designation senpai for instance, and even the state. The Chinese character for filial piety is xiao. In Japanese, this kanji is pronounced takashi, and essentially means that the same selflessness and devotion that is displayed in serving one's family should also extend to serving one's country. This means social harmony is in large part thanks to this kind of social hierarchy, but unfortunately, this also comes at the expense of people not speaking up and voicing dissent when one's elders or those in positions of authority abuse their power. In this way, the Phantom Thieves squaring up to these rotten adults in the context of Japanese society demonstrates a much greater challenge to the status quo compared to the individualistic wider West, where the general spirit of counterculture and dissent is much more acceptable. So yeah, I think that basically covers the main reasons why I've really wanted to do this series that focuses on P5's characters. I've already done videos for Akechi and Makoto, and will be releasing the one on Joker next week. All the members of the PT will eventually get one though, so vote in the polls I'll continue to put out on my channel's community tab. Anyway guys, it would really help me out if you like this video if you liked this, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video in this series. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, take care. See ya!